This is a folk tale from Scandinavia called the Lindworm. Long ago, there lived a king and a queen very happily, except there had never been any children. The queen's inability to conceive weighed on her. She was once in a foreign part of the garden, a place she didn't go often, and she was weeping. And an old woman appeared and said, "Oh, why are you crying?" And the queen said, "I am not able to have children. We have been married for many years and none have come." "I can help you," said the old woman. "Go back to the palace and get a silver bowl and bring it here. And prick your finger on a rose thorn and drip 2 drops of blood upon the ground. Cover it with the bowl and come back tomorrow. You will find 2 roses, a red and a white. Eat the white one if you wish a girl, and the red one for a son, but do not eat them both." Now the queen only half believed her, but it could not hurt to try. And the woman disappeared, and she went and got the silver bowl, and she dripped 2 drops of blood upon the ground and covered it with the bowl. The next day she came back, and there were 2 roses, a red and a white. She said, "Oh, if I eat the red, my husband will be so pleased to have an heir, but he might go away to the wars and be killed. If I eat the white, I will have a daughter and perhaps grandchildren someday." And she looked at the roses and she breathed in that intoxicating smell. She ate one, and then without even thinking, she ate the other as well. Soon it was clear that the queen was expecting, and her husband was delighted. But unfortunately, right at the time the baby was due, he was called away on a border skirmish. And it was just the queen and the midwife in the room when she was giving birth. She had a fine high bed, and the room was strewn with sweet-smelling rushes. There came the rolls of the labor pains, and out came a small, black, worm-like dragon with tiny hands and teeth, and she and the midwife both shrieked, and the midwife swept it off the bed, and it scuttled away under the reeds. The queen could not believe her eyes, but she was soon distracted by another round of pains, and this time a beautiful little boy came out. The queen thought perhaps she had seen that thing because of the pains of labor, or maybe the midwife had given her a draught to calm her down, and she didn't think about it again for 18 years. Now the boy grew to be a fine young man. He was his parents' delight. He was clever and handsome and always kind. And time came when he thought he should have a wife. So he set off one day on horseback to visit a nearby castle. But when he came to the crossroads, ahead of him drew a great big worm with teeth and venom flowing, and the worm spoke to him, "The oldest son must marry first, a bride for me before a bride for you." And the young man reined in his horse, and he came to another crossroads, and there was the worm again. "The oldest son must marry first, a bride for me before a bride for you." And he went to a third crossroad, and there was the creature again. And this time he said, "A bride for me before a bride for you, brother." Now the young man turned his horse around, and he rode as quickly as he could back to the palace. And he told his parents about this creature. And his mother got white as a sheet and looked as if she might faint. And she told her husband and son about the roses and about the thing that she had given birth to, and no one blamed her. The father, realizing that this was his son, this monster, he went out and he coaxed it to come to the palace. He brought it in, it set it up in what used to be the dungeon, and they could hear it roaring, "A bride for me before a bride for you." So they set about trying to find a bride for the Lindworm. From a distant kingdom, they invited a princess to come and marry the son. They did not tell her which son. And as she stood next to this creature before the priest, she nearly fainted from fright. She was taken away to the bridal chamber. There were many noises coming from there in the night, and when the king and queen went in the next morning, there was only a bloody wedding gown left. The creature went back down into the dungeon, but soon they heard him again. "The oldest son must marry first." And they tried with another princess. again from a distant kingdom, and she came and she stood beside him just like the first bride and had to be held up by the elbows, with the same result, another bloodied wedding gown. Now there were no more princesses to be had, for the castle now had an evil reputation, and there were two warring parties ready to make war on the king. So he went to the shepherd, who had long worked on his lands, an older man, and he said, "You have a daughter, do you not?" I do," said the shepherd, but she is my heart's delight." "No, she must come and marry my son." And though the shepherd tried to dissuade him, the king said, "My soldiers will be here in the morning to bring her to the palace." The shepherd told his daughter. She said, "Father, it may yet work out all right." And she went walking in the woods to tell the trees and the meadow goodbye. And there before her was an old woman, and she said, "My dear, why are you so distressed?" And the shepherd's daughter said, "I must marry a monster. He has already eaten 2 brides, and I know my fate will be the same. Listen to me. I will tell you exactly what to do." And she told the girl that when she was taken to the wedding chamber, she must put on 10 linen shifts, and she must ask for a vat of lye and a vat of milk and as many willow branches as a boy can carry. Worm will tell you to shed a shift, and you must tell him to shed a skin. And when he is down to the last one, you must put him in the lye and burn away all the evil he has done, and beat him with the willow branches until there is not a whole branch left. And then bathe him in the milk and take him to bed. Now, the girl promised she would do exactly what the old woman told her. She went the next day with the soldiers. She stood up on her own power beside the Lindworm, huge and black with fangs and dripping venom. It was a very somber wedding ceremony. And she was escorted sadly to the bridal chamber. And the worm stood up before her and said, "Shed a shift, fair maid." And she said, "Shed a skin, Lindworm." "No one has said that to me." "I say it to you. In fact, I command you." And with writhings and twistings, the Lindworm shed a skin. "Shed a shift, fair maid." "Shed a skin, Lindworm." And he shed another skin. And they did this 9 times. And with each shedding of the skin, it got harder and harder. It ripped, it bled, until he was left a bloody mass on the floor. And then she picked him up and put him into the vat of lye. And it burned and pained. And when she brought him out, she beat him until there was not a whole willow branch left. And then she picked him up and put him into the vat of milk and bathed him and soothed him. And she wrapped him in the 9 shifts and dragged him to the bed. And she was so tired. She put her arms around him and fell asleep. Now the king and the queen went with much dread to the wedding chamber. The door was open just a crack. They saw no blood. They opened it a tiny bit further. The wedding gown was unstained. And when they opened the door all the way, there in the bed was a young couple, the handsomest young man you could think of, wrapped in the arms of the shepherd's daughter. There was another wedding feast, much more joyous than the first. And the king embraced her, and the queen, and his brother. And the Lindworm's deeds were not to be forgotten. His black and scaling shape was woven into their coat of arms to always be remembered. And never was a daughter-in-law so beloved. She was embraced by one and all, for she had saved the kingdom, their own lives, and their son through her courage and calmness. And they all lived well and happily ever after. Thank you.